Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrea Ostheimer and I'm the representative of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung to the United Nations here in New York. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion highlighting why women in the judiciary matter. We provide simultaneous translation between English and Spanish in this event, and you find the channels for interpretation at the bottom of your Zoom menu bar. Our discussion today is the third side event that CAS New York is hosting in the context of this year's Convention on the Status of Women, CSW 65. The priority theme of CSW 65 has been, besides of the effects of COVID on the life and rights of women, it has been this year women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life. Last week, CAS New York hosted two discussions around the representation of women in policymaking and the public sector. We addressed the class ceilings women experience in diplomacy and foreign policy making, and we also directed our attention to the impediments of women in political parties. In his opening address last week, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres highlighted the dire situation of women in public leadership positions and called on those in power to change and to transform the institutions. In fact, his picture has been quite sobering. And here I'm quoting him: "Women make up a mere quarter of national legislatures worldwide, a third of local government members, and just 1/5 of cabinet ministers. Only 22 countries are headed by a woman head of state or government. And at current rates, parity among heads of government will not be achieved until 2150. That's right, another 130 years of men making the same kinds of decisions they have made for the past 130 years and more." These are the words of Antonio Guterres. And the sector he has not included in his balance sheet, in fact, is the judiciary. Only 33.6% of women hold positions in Supreme Courts worldwide. And the trend is mirrored in the proportion of presidential positions women occupy. On average, women hold 45.9% of presidencies in lower courts, 28% in courts of appeal, and 18.6% in high courts. These were the shortcomings we want to discuss today with our excellent panel of high-ranking women judges from across the globe. And it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Honorable Lady Justice Joyce Alouach, a former judge and first vice president of the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Prior to that, she was a judge of the High Court and Court of Appeal in Kenya, having been appointed second woman judge in Kenya. Lady Alouach, you're certainly a woman who made it through the glass ceiling, and we are honored to have you with us today. Thank you. From Costa Rica, I would like to welcome Justice Nancy Hernandez Lopez, who currently serves in the Sala Constitucional of Costa Rica's Supreme Court and who has just recently been nominated as a candidate for the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Justice Hernandez Lopez, congratulations, and also thank you for sharing your time. A warm welcome goes to Judge Maria dos Prazeres Beleza, Vice President of the Supreme Court of Justice in Portugal, and the first woman holding this position in your country. It is surprising actually to hear this for a European country, and we are eager to learn more from you in your discussion. Judge Amani Salameh from Lebanon will provide us with a perspective from the Middle East. Justice Salameh is an investigating judge. She is the president of the Lebanese Judges Association and also in the leadership of the Arab Union of Judges. Thank you so much, Amani Salameh, for sharing your time and your insights also to round off this global perspective. Daniel Salazar Marin is the youngest serving judge in the Constitutional Court of Ecuador and its vice president.
Thank you.
Justice Salazar Marin, we are eager to learn from you how you overcame not only the gender, but also the generational barrier which so often exists. And last but not least, I would like to introduce Anja Seibert-Fohr, judge at the European Court of Human Rights since January 2020. Justice Seibert-Fohr has been vice chair of the UN Human Rights Committee and chair of international law and human rights at the University of Göttingen. Before, she also served as professor at the University of Heidelberg, where she directed the Minerva Research Group of Judicial Independence. Thank you so much for accommodating your agenda with us, Judge Seibert-Foer. And as you are under time constraints, I also would like to start our discussion immediately with you. But before, I would like to invite our participants, our audience, to write their questions and comments into the Q&A section of the Zoom bar menu, so you can accommodate the questions along the way. Ms. Seibert-Foer, you are a judge of the European Court of Human Rights, and the ECHR is composed by about a third of women today. For gender balance on the court, states are asked to put forward at least one candidate from the underrepresented sex, unless there are exceptional circumstances. Would you say that these kind of requisitions are necessary in order to provide the space for women in the judiciary?
Well, before I start answering your question, let me warmly welcome everybody and also my colleague, my fellow judges from all over the world. I'm very happy to see you here, and I'm grateful to the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for having facilitated this important event, which I find very pertinent in the current era. We shouldn't forget over COVID that we have many human rights issues, and amongst them is also the non-discrimination of women. Now, with regard to your question, you are absolutely right. We are in a way underrepresented also on the European Court of Human Rights. We have a total of 15 female judges currently out of 47 judges, which corresponds to the number of states parties to the European Convention of Human Rights. So we have barely 30%. So the percentage may even be worse than the one that you had just indicated with regard to highest courts. There has been it has been a variety of percentages. To your question, I think it is very important to have female judges on the bench, and this applies not only to the European Court of Human Rights, but also to all courts, not only those dealing with human rights protection, but also domestic courts in all levels of jurisdiction. Because in a way, we speak justice in the name of the people, and the people are female and male. And we also have recently recognized intersex persons. And therefore, I think it is very important also to recognize that in order to show this kind of, or to give credibility also to this speaking in the name of the people, we need to have a diverse bench. Therefore, it's still not understandable why states after so many decades still have problems in nominating female judges. It certainly doesn't have to do with lack of competence, because we will talk about law schools later on, but I think that female judges bring the same qualification as the male counterparts. So I think not only in order to be more persuasive in terms of our jurisprudence, but also in order to have a better understanding of the issues involved when we talk about non-discrimination, it is very important to have also female judges on the bench.
Yeah, thank you. You have also been a professor of public and international and comparative law and on human rights at both universities, Heidelberg and Göttingen. And certainly when you looked at your group of students, you might have seen this kind of gender balance, but when you already turned to your core of fellow professors, you notice a male dominance. Would you say that the important steps for women in law are already taken at university level? And what would universities need to do in order to create a better environment for the career of women in the judiciary?
Well, you're absolutely right. At least 50% of my students are female students. So we have a really equal balance in terms of law students at our university. Sometimes there are even more female students than male students, because sometimes female do better in undergraduate studies and they have better achievements in their grades and they get admitted. So let's be frank about this. However, the further you go in the academic career, the more difficult it becomes for women to keep up with this 50% quota. I think I'm not quite sure whether this is a problem that the universities can really remedy. My perspective is as follows. I have a lot of women who study with me. I have a lot of women who do their doctorate with me. In fact, I have more female doctoral students than male. This may be because of my, I don't know, perhaps I'm more attractive to females. I don't know about this, but and it's also very common that in human rights attract a lot of more women than other fields of law. So I would say at this level, we still have equality. However, then it becomes more and more difficult. Why does it become more difficult? Because then the women are entering a stage where they are founding family. And I think that the major obstacle, at least from my perspective, is really not really the academia itself, but the surrounding circumstances, which oftentimes prevent women from pursuing a career, at least where I come from, in Germany. So for me, for example, when I returned from the US, where I did my doctorate, it was very, very difficult for me to persuade my boss to give me only part-time position, half-time position, because I wanted to take care of my kids. And it was really a juggling to raise my 3 children at the same point of time as pursuing my judicial career, or my academic career, which then led to my judicial career. Coming back to your question about the universities, perhaps it would be useful for the universities to offer more part-time positions, for example, where women would be more flexible. This doesn't mean that women have to go for part-time, but I think especially in Germany, sometimes it's very difficult to reach the level of expertise that is required if you have only part-time position. You know, everything is calculated in terms of time and also the amount of papers that you have been published and so on and so forth. And this is a condition that may be detrimental for a career at the university. And I have to admit, at my university, which is the eldest university of Germany and one of the eldest in Europe, University of Heidelberg, we only have 2 law professors. So this is, it's kind of embarrassing. I would say that I'm treated very well by my male colleagues, but it shows how difficult it can be to achieve this kind of level which enable you to become a professor. And I think that we need a change in society, in the structure, which enable the women to pursue their lifestyle, to opt for a family, but still go on with their careers and to be able to become judges, professors.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Judge Seibert, for and particularly for highlighting the kind of social transformation that we need and the right setting that has to be in place in order to really manage this juggle between professional career and family life. I would like to go now on to Honorable Lady Justice Joyce Aluoch. You have made a most formidable career. You have served as judge of the High Court of Kenya. You have also been the vice president of the International Criminal Court. What kind of advice would you give to young women who want to pursue their judicial career, speaking out of your own experience?
Thank you. Thank you. May I first of all thank you, Andrea and Maria, for inviting me to this session so that I could meet these very distinguished women judges from around the world. Thank you very much. Now, my advice to young women who wish to pursue a judicial career, and I have so many of them because I mentor a lot of young women. And first and foremost, I would encourage them to do so. But I would caution them that it's not a walk in the park. I may not use those words, but I would tell them that there are so many other things that need to be done. Honesty and integrity is key for a position on the bench. You're dealing with people's lives, liberty, and you just have to be straight. These are things that I saw as I was growing up, because I joined the bench at a fairly young age, fairly young. And I joined the bench at the lowest level possible, because that is all that was available. And anytime I looked at my law degree, I said, I will take this law degree to the highest level possible, having joined the judiciary as a magistrate and at a fairly low grade. And I thank God that I lived to that reality. So I would tell the young ladies that there's a lot of hard work on the bench, but it's very rewarding, because when you handle a case through and you see the outcome, be it civil or criminal, and you know that you have given it your best and you have exercised honesty and fairness, then you will feel satisfied. So I would encourage as many girls as possible, and I'm happy to say that in Kenya, the lower bench, the magisterial bench, we have more women than men. And in the High Court, on the High Court bench, we have a lot of women also, as opposed to the time when the first woman judge and me, the second woman judge, we were alone for almost 10 years as just two women on the Kenyan bench. And in the Supreme Court, because we have a Supreme Court since 2010, I wasn't here, I was in The Hague, but a new constitution ushered in the Supreme Court. There are two women, and we are not very happy about that, because the Supreme Court has 7 judges, and we don't see why there shouldn't be appointed, at least there shouldn't be 3 and 4 or 4 and 3. We can't have equal number. And right now, one of our Deputy Chief Justice is a woman. And because the Chief Justice retired about a month or 2 ago, she is actually the acting Chief Justice before another Chief Justice is appointed. The process is ongoing. So I would tell the younger generation of women that the sky is the limit in this job. You can take it to the highest level possible. You can start off as a district magistrate, as I did, work your way, and eventually I found myself at the International Criminal Court, where I served as a judge and a vice president, and I served for a total term of 9 years. So I would encourage them in every way possible. I would tell them anytime they can come and talk to me, and I'll tell them just what I think is right, is appropriate for this job.
Thank you. Yeah. You already mentioned mentoring, and perhaps we can also come back on that later in the discussion. But what could even the judiciary itself do, from your perspective, in order to promote gender balance on the courts? What kind of initiatives have to be launched in order to achieve a kind of a gender balance setting?
Thank you for that question. It's very interesting that you should put that question, because there has been a judiciary gender audit report. There is in Kenya a judiciary gender audit report. In fact, the report was signed by the Chief Justice, and also the chair of the National Gender and Equality Commission. Now, the report pointed out 9 areas where the judiciary, they identified 9 areas of concern identified by the gender audit that the judiciary need to do some work on. 9 are too many, I can't read them all. But they also identified ways of handling those 9 areas. Something like adopt a comprehensive gender policy. The judiciary needs to adopt a comprehensive gender policy. The judiciary needs to take measures to increase the number of women in senior leadership roles. These are some of the things they identified, and this. And then collect and analyze gender disaggregated data across the field beyond the total workforce, and develop and deliver gender sensitive and inclusive training curriculum for all employees. And this report is very current, and that's why I'm borrowing from it. And put safeguards in place to ensure fairness in court annex mediation. I handle court annex mediation since I got back in 2018 after the ICC. And then use simple education materials on equality and non-discrimination to educate the public, and so on and so forth. We have this audit report on the table. And as I said, 9 areas were identified in the judiciary that needed attention. Yes, and some of them would be like, the judiciary did not have a policy addressing the use of affirmative action so that it could be applied consistently when warranted. That was identified in our judiciary, that the judiciary lacked a formal plan or framework for achieving gender parity within specific timelines in its senior leadership positions. This is, in fact, that the report was signed only last year, 2020. The Judiciary Training Institute did not often and consistently provide for training on gender equality and how to apply it in service delivery and the workplace. Discrimination was largely understood to not only encompass direct discrimination based on formal equality. And court processes and case management, including court annex mediation programs, were often not viewed from a gender perspective. Even in court decisions discussing constitutional principles, the language sometimes lacked gender sensitivity. Women appeared to participate less as litigants in the formal justice sector. So this is a very recent report, just late last year. And this is a report that the judiciary has to work on because it was commissioned.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent first and encouraging step, but let's hope that the political momentum will also build up in order to address these kind of deficiencies that are elaborated. Let's move now to Portugal. Maria dos Prazeres Beleza, in 2018, you have been elected as Vice President of Portugal's Supremo Tribunal de Justiça, the Supreme Court of Justice. You are the first woman holding this position after also having served in the court for 12 years. And women judges still remain underrepresented in the higher courts in Portugal. To what extent is this also a result of constraints from the past, where women were not even allowed to become magistrates until the end of the Salazar-Caetano dictatorship in 1974? Is this really a legacy, or would you see it's more kind of a structural problem?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation for participating in such distinguished panel. Well, going directly to the matters, I will try to explain why, although most judges today in Portugal are women, they are really underrepresented in the Supreme Court. I'm trying to explain this. Well, quickly speaking, when I went to university to study law many years ago, in 1973, women were not allowed to be judges. Well, as a matter of fact, the rights of women were very different from rights of men, but specifically in the judiciary, they could not be judges. They could not be judges until 1974. It began with the Portuguese Revolution and the major changes that it brought to the Portuguese society, namely to women's rights. Today, and I have some numbers to show what the real, but what is really happening. But today, most law students and most judges are women. In the judicial courts in 2019, there were 1,734 judges and 171 were women. 1,071 were women, 663 were men. I'm talking about the year of 2019, and of in the judicial courts, 1,734 judges. It's a real, most women are judges now. Well, I say the judicial courts because Portugal follows the French systems and has a separate jurisdiction for the public administration, the administrative and tax courts. Well, I say most women are judges, but I say that most women are judges in the first instance courts. And this majority will increase in the years to come because most students in the School of Judges are women, but most students by far, almost 18%. It's mandatory to attend this particular school if you want to become a professional judge. But women are still a minority in the Supreme Courts. In the Courts of Appeal, the number of men and women are 50-50, almost 50-50. And I would like you to know that today in Portugal, in the Constitutional Court, which has 13 judges, 5 are women. In the Supreme Court of Justice, in 64 judges, 19 are women. In the Supreme Administrative Court, there are 12 women in 32 judges, but the president and the 2 vice presidents are women. The Attorney General is a woman, and so was the previous one. Well, in my opinion, the main reason for the obvious underrepresented of women in the Supreme Court relies on the fact that the women were barred from the profession of judge until 1974, in addition to the slow progression in the judicial career. Most professional judges are in their late 50s or already 60 by the time they reach the Supreme Court of Justice. Apart from 10 of the 13 Constitutional Court judges, in Portugal, judges are not elected. Those 10 are elected by Parliament, and only 6 must be judges of the other courts. But there is not a required minimum number of women to be elected to the Constitutional Court. To enter the professional school of judges, to begin the judicial career and to be promoted, you must always apply as a candidate in the open or competitive selection. The career begins in the lower courts. To become a judge of a court of appeal, you must be a professional judge, or I mean a judge of the lower courts. But the Supreme Court may have a certain number of previous public prosecutor and of previous lawyer or law teachers, 1/5 for each other. It is this mixed composition of the Supreme Court that explains the current number of women in the Supreme Court of Justice, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, 8 of the 12 non-professional judges are women. Well, but I think that those two reasons are not the only reasons for the underrepresentation of women. I mean, the legal impossibility of becoming a judge until 1974 and the very slow progression of the judicial career. I think they are not the only reasons for the misrepresentation of women in the Supreme Court. Female judges experience the same difficulty of reconciling profession and family life as other women do, mainly if they have children. The progression in the career of a professional judge depends on merit and requires moving from one court to another. The merit of first instance judges is evaluated by the Supreme Judicial Council, who has the constitutional competence to appoint, to assign, to transfer, and to promote judges. The Supreme Judicial Council is independent from the executive power. Pregnancy and motherhood frequently causes difficulties that may have impact on the evaluation of women judges for several reasons, such as the period of working time that is required for the evaluation. And as a result, it may have impact on their progression in the judicial career and on the promotion, of course, that require moving from a different city. I suppose that sometimes women may give up the promotion more easily than men when they have to move from another city. Well, the rules that are defined by the Supreme Judicial Council, I'm talking slowly because the words are similar, but I'm talking about the Supreme Judicial Council. The rules that it defines for the evaluation of first instance judges are changing. And one of the goals of the changing is to prevent that pregnancy and parenthood leaves cause that negative impact that I referred. For instance, leading to postpone the evaluations and the promotions. Well, as far as I know, there are no further initiatives to remedy the underrepresentation of women in the Supreme Courts. For instance, requiring a certain proportion of women in the Supreme Courts. There is no such requirement. Or preventing the disadvantages of having to move from city to city to be promoted from the judge in the first instance. Frequently, the underrepresentation of men in the School of Judges and in the first instance is discussed. But I think that the current opinion about underrepresentation of women in the Supreme Court is that it will be corrected without specific remedies, just by the regular functioning of the system of progression in the judicial career. I'm not so sure. I cannot explain the reason why I became vice president only in, I know, not me, a woman became vice president in the Supreme Court only in 2018. Maybe it's partly because of the underrepresentation of women. The number of women judges in the Supreme Court is increasing very slowly. And the Supreme Court of Justice plays a leading role in the interpretation of the law. Its decisions are not binding for the other courts, but in practice, they usually follow the Supreme Court's jurisprudence. So I think that the equitative representation of women really matters in all areas of law. And that's what I have to say.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Judge Dos Prazeres Beleza, for drawing our attention to the situation in Portugal. In the midst of Europe, we would not probably have expected such a situation. And I would like to move on now to the Middle East. Amani Salameh, you are a staunch advocate for the independence of the judiciary, and you also see it as something important in the fight against corruption. You come from Lebanon, a country that made headlines, particularly in the last year, in relation to high levels of corruption and nepotism. which threw also the country in a permanent state of turmoil, a crisis. Would you say that women judges are better in the fight against corruption in the system, as also competence for us is more important than political allegiances or favoritism? And we just heard from Justice Joyce Alouar that it's about honesty and integrity that we have to also demonstrate as women on the bench.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Andrea. First of all, allow me to thank you for honoring me to participate in this honorable webinar. I prepared a small, a roundup that's related to the question that you just asked me. So I'll give a little bit a general idea before about the situation in Lebanon, about the women's status in the Lebanese judiciary, before I get straight to your questions. So, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am from a country as small as 10,452 square kilometers called Lebanon. Small by size, but huge by its culture, values, and heritage, yet shattered by forces of evil that tried all along its history to dimmer its light. I'm from a country whose prominent late Charles Malik was a key player in drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 and was the president of the Human Rights Commission at the United Nations. I'm from a country where women won the right to vote in 1952 and that ratified in 1997 the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and many more treaties. After a long period of exclusion and dismissing of female candidates to judiciary, a law was adopted in 1983, assuring no distinction whatsoever between male and female in the field. And since then, the growth in the number of female candidates approached the parity with the male candidates, which caused a fear of feminization of the sector in 1994. That led to the prohibition of female candidates by a high judicial council. But this decision was cancelled the next year after huge objections. Subsequently, the percentage of women candidates admitted to the Institute of Judicial Studies varied between 38% and reached once 100% of female candidates to the Institute. And lately, it is around 52%. And in total, women constitute half of the working Lebanese judges. Not only gender equality is respected in Lebanon, but women judges are also nominated in almost all judicial fields and levels. From the Supreme Judicial Council, we have now 2 women out of 10, to the Judicial Inspection Authority, the Judicial Board of Judges, President of Supreme Courts, public prosecutors, first investigative judge. It is worth mentioning also that all the departments in the Ministry of Justice are nowadays presided by women judges. For instance, the Director General is a woman, the Committee of Legislation and Consultations, the Committee of Cases, the Institute of Judges Studies, they're all presided by a woman judge. Usually, women were not assigned to criminal courts. However, given the feminine flow in the judiciary and their good skills in all areas of law, their number increased in criminal courts and reached nowadays almost 40% versus 60% in civil ones. Despite their considerable presence in the judiciary, as mentioned above, the presence of women judges in religious courts, in Lebanon we have civil courts and we have religious courts that deals with personal status for individuals, is still unfortunately scarce, a field that is exclusively reserved for women. Well, this is something that might deprive women from the presence of someone that they can relate to. On another note, after judges going on strikes for many times because of severe violations of their rights, among which the principle of the independence of the judiciary, a new player saw the light in 2018, the Lebanese Judges Association. Its main goals are the defense of judges' rights, the enhancement of the independence of the judiciary, and fighting corruption. This association was founded back then in 2018 with almost 45% of women judges. And now female members are almost 60%, with a chairwoman that happened to be myself. It is true that Lebanon is a Middle Eastern country, yet it has a very special identity due to the combination of Eastern and Western culture. And gender equality in the judiciary is one of its results. But women have not the same status, unfortunately, in all Arab countries. In fact, the hegemony of patriarchal culture, the misinterpretation of religions, and the poverty in some regions prevent it. Yet, judges' associations in these countries have definitely the duty to lobby women's rights in the judiciary and to promote gender equality. Well, in light of this strong presence of women in the judiciary, what can we say about their contribution, challenges? Is justice in better hands? In my opinion, the importance of a judge, any judge, resides in its ability to judge the person and not the case. How? Sometimes judges tend to forget the human element behind facts of the file, the laws and the procedural technicalities, and they merely render a legally and procedurally correct judgment, which unfortunately are not always fair and just. This is where justice is dimmed and shattered. For what is the importance of laws if justice is not served? For what is the importance of procedures if justice is denied? Even though compassion and empathy are not exclusive for women, I have tendency to believe that women judges are more prone to grant justice than men usually do by reaching out for people's heart and consciences. In light of the above, I will mention two decisions rendered lately by women judges that made a difference, like the one that obliged defendants who destruct the Holy Virgin Mary statue to memorize Quranic verses that praise the Virgin Mary in the Quran itself, instead of sending them to jail. Another decision permitted to a minor who was a victim of bullying and rape by youngsters to be the judge for one day and to take the seat of that judge in court and to address to them the needed words. Then allowed the minor to order the police to take the defendants to jail. The purpose of this decision is to restore some of the minor's lost dignity and pride. Women judges may want to render more than just a decision or a judgment. They are eager to correct the bad course of life. If women magistrates know how to handle emotional and human cases, it does not mean that they cannot handle also the most sensitive ones related to criminal cases and terrorism with the utmost professionalism and devotion. What differentiates women judges in these cases is their high capability to withstand pressure and to overcome all kinds of interferences in their work. It is well established that women have a lower tolerance for corrupt behavior, favoritism, and nepotism because they tend to be less upstart and more caring for what is right. And as a tangible proof, a scandal in the judiciary blew up in Lebanon a couple of years ago, putting many judges on trial for corruption, and they were exclusively men. Therefore, the increase of women in the judiciary creates a trustworthy mood in the sector, which should encourage concerned parties to designate more women in higher positions. Are women judges more competent in fighting corruption? Is in full state crisis due to the high rate of corruption that consumed the country's pillar over the years and lead to rank the country as one of the in the world, 149 over 180, unfortunately. And this is the Transparency International's index. This dramatic situation caused by a corrupted coalition established between politicians and other co-actors in many fields led to all kinds of crimes against vanished and their lives taken away with the blast of the 4th of August, which generate a huge anger and outrage. So far, the Judiciary Authority couldn't handle well this extremely dangerous period in the history of our beloved country, mainly because of the political affiliations and allegiances of most major positions in the judiciary, mostly by men, and to some laws that do not favor easy and independent prosecution. Nevertheless, The judiciary saw lately some courageous decisions from both genders, each in their scope of work, and the Lebanese Judges Association did not hesitate to take publicly major positions and to act to this extent, to this end. In fact, the association took various measures to expose some of the illegal and criminal activities. And after the revolution of 17th of October 2019, it sent a written letter to the Special Investigation Commission at the Central Bank, urging it to initiate a temporary freeze of certain bank accounts owned by PEPs and public officials, and to undertake immediate investigation into their legitimacy. But unfortunately, none of this was done because of the same vicious political alliances. At the end, women or men, it doesn't matter. What really counts is their will of change, the change of this dramatic situation we live in, while counting on Goddess Themis to drag out her sword and to hit badly all what causes the misery of Lebanese citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge Amani Salemi, for this fervent and passionate plaidoyer, how women really can make a difference in the judiciary. And in this sense, I also would like to direct now also a question to Nancy Hernandez Lopez from Costa Rica and bring her, Latin America into our discussion. Nancy Hernandez Lopez, you are serving since 2013 in the constitutional branch of the Costa Rica Supreme Court, a branch where women are still underrepresented. The Sala Constitucional is at the heart of protecting human rights and women's rights. During your last 8 years in the Sala Constitucional, have you noticed that women's rights have been approached differently by your male or your female colleagues?
Yes, first of all, good morning and thank you for the invitation. And I'm very honored to share this panel with such distinguished justices. I would give my presentation in Spanish if it's okay.
First of all, I want to tell you that the Costa Rican situation is quite similar to what our panelists have described in their countries. When I joined the Supreme Court of Justice, just to work, not as a magistrate, and that was 1990, there was just one woman as a magistrate, and today we are 8 out of the total of 22. Many things have changed over these last years, because before there were not women judges represented. Today, they have to pursue a legal career, and we have a higher percentage, but the higher the position, the lower the representation of women in the higher courts and in the constitutional courts as well. And it's really quite hard to find women represented. Over 30 years in the constitutional chamber, there have been only 3 women, and as a president or chief justice in the Supreme Court, we have 3 women over a 200-year period. So what do we want in Costa Rica? I mean, the situation is pretty similar in Costa Rica as to what you have described in your own countries. As to the question as if at the time of evaluating in my court, these gender issues are dealt with differently between men and women, it is different. In all the issues relating to sexual harassment, gender violence, or obstetrics, violence, breastfeeding, I mean, women's contribution has been really relevant at the time of evaluating the evidence and to communicate these life experiences that mean only women can know, because they are very close to our hearts. So the more diverse the courts, the more collaborative can the quality of justice can be, because we will include different perspectives. Being women, half of the population of the country. This was the group thinking, as it was called, and it enables to consider different points of view, to value evidence, and in a concrete and a specific case, to apply justice which is more realistic based. In that sense, I agree with the Hale justice that presides over in the United Kingdom. If the courts are integrated, are diversely integrated, the better. There are oil conflicts or law of the sea, but there are areas such as human rights or constitutional law where it is absolutely important to have women represented there in the tribunals dealing with these cases. You might remember, especially, the judge of the International Criminal Court, to remember the case of the Judge Pillay from South Africa in the Akayesu case in the Random Court 1997 that ruled that the violation of sexual assault under an armed conflict state can be considered genocide or crimes against humanity when they aim at destroying partly or in fully the national identity, racial integrity, or religious of groups of people. The same can be said of the participation of Odio Benito justice, the ex-Yugoslavians, and women who have participated in drafting the statutes of the International Criminal Court. Only when women came into these courts, these issues started coming up to life. During 2015, during the International Congress of Women in The Hague, these topics have been raised unsuccessfully, and also in the trials of Nuremberg and Torrigan. Not only until the gender perspective was included in the courts can those issues be valued and being brought to light or under the spotlight. The same can be said of interviews with Ruth Begging's justice when she was saying that she has dealt with cases, and one specifically, Safford versus Redding, a case of a 13-year-old girl that was searched physically, completely naked, and she said that she had to discuss with the male counterparts about how women feels embarrassed at that adolescent stage, and this is to point out the reasonability to have submitted a teenage to be investigated in this manner. As it was mentioned in the Day of Women, women judges contribute to inclusion of the gender perspective in the judiciary. My experience in this court, I have seen that judges are receptive and sensitive to the different points of view that women can contribute. These are perspectives that wouldn't have been equally valued or made visible hadn't there been diversity in place. And I think that diversity enriches the judiciary in the human rights courts especially, and it gives more legitimacy and credibility to all courts. For instance, let's imagine a ruling or a sentence dealing with gender issues passed by a male-based court. The interpretation of the law might be the right one, but not necessarily it will be perceived in that manner, seen in that manner. So it seems to me that it's relevant in these types of courts, especially in human rights courts, to have a perspective as diverse as possible.
Thank you very much,
Muchas
Lopez, also for those very practical examples that underline how diversity can enhance also the quality of the jurisdiction, and particularly in areas like human rights. I would like to stay in Latin America and also now move on to Daniela Salazar-Marin, the youngest judge serving in the Constitutional Court of Ecuador. You are also the vice president, and your career has been very impressive, and it shows also that you have worked at a broad variety of institutions. You have been lecturing at the University of San Francisco in Quito. You have worked for the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, UNESCO, the International Committee of the Red Cross, also for Human Rights Watch. And from your perspective, would you say that as a woman pursuing a career in the judiciary, you need also to have a more diverse profile, more international exposure than your male colleagues in order to advance?
First, let me say how honored I am with this invitation and to be a part of this panel with such amazing justices and magistrates from around the world. Thank you, all of you, for all the doors that you have opened for many other women like me. I'm very, very grateful. And thank you also for the invitation. Andrea, thank you for your very kind words about my professional career. However, I do have to clarify that I am actually not the youngest judge at my court. The court that I belong to has 9 judges, the Constitutional Court. 4 of those judges are women, and all of us are young. My 3 colleagues are very brilliant as well. And the youngest judge, her name is Carla Andrade. She's the youngest. And actually, when she became a judge, her second son was only like 6 months old. So she has like gone through a lot of struggles in her position, and I have the utmost respect for her. So I have to give her the credit of being the youngest judge. That said, I know I am very young in comparison with people who usually occupy this type of position around the world. And I think that's actually one of the strengths of our court. Diversity, not only gender diversity, not only ideological diversity, but also age diversity, contributes and enriches the deliberation and the plurality in the debate of the court. So it's a very positive outcome of how the court is now composed. I also have to clarify that I did not get to this position through the judicial career. My career was mostly focused in the academic, and then I had the opportunity to participate in a public and merits competition to be able to occupy the position of judge of the Constitutional Court that I have now. But it doesn't matter whether you're in the judiciary or if you're in the academics. The truth is that women who have decision-making positions, we're always questions. There is always questions about whether we are good enough for this position. What did we do to merit that position? It's as if people almost presume that we do not deserve to be there. And that question is never made with respect to our male colleagues. I feel like, at least in Ecuador, this patriarchal society that we live in, assume that many times women get this type of position, not because of her merit, because of something else that she did. And so to answer your question, I would say yes, to be able to get to this position, to this decision-making position in the judiciary, women are often asked to have a very solid academic and professional background, something that's out of the common, something that's different and diverse, because it's as if we were constantly subjected to scrutiny and to the suspicion that maybe we're not well prepared enough. And even once we get to be in a position like the one I have now, I feel like it's a daily thing. We're questioned every day whether we're really able to assume all of this responsibility, whether we are maybe abandoning our family responsibilities or duties, we are abandoning our children, whether we're too young, whether our children are too small, whether because we have families, we are not focusing enough on our professional responsibilities. What I would like to say is I feel like we are measured with a different measuring tape as our male colleagues. And this is something that happens, every day. There is like this adverse context that forces us to be better prepared, because we constantly have to show and demonstrate with our work that women are able to be in such a position. And so the way I handle it is like every day for me it's a proof, but it's mostly an opportunity to demonstrate that despite my gender and despite my age, I can take this responsibility. I can do this job. And at the same time, every day I have to recognize that there's a lot of privilege that allow me to be here, and that the circumstances are not the same for many other women or for most of the other women. Even though I just said I don't come from the judicial career, I'm completely conscious that in the judiciary, in the judicial career, it is harder for women, not only because of the stereotypes that I just mentioned, but also because of the prevalence of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment often is one of the reasons that there is a glass ceiling, I feel like, because sexual harassment is present in the judiciary, just like in any other area of the society. And so sexual harassment affects judges and prosecutors and defenders and lawyers and anybody and any woman in the judiciary, as much as it happens outside in the streets. And the sexual harassment often pushes women away from their job, because they have to be able to run away from some of the men who often harass women. And this has the effects that many women end up leaving the judicial career and leaving the lawyer career just because they are running away from sexual harassment. And this has the effect that they do not advance in their career, and they will never be able to have a position like the one I right now have the privilege to have. So I think there's a lot of work to do for women to be able to get to a merits and to a decision-making position in equal conditions as men. It's not enough that we get prepared. It's not enough that we have a solid professional background. It's not enough with parity rules. What we really need to is to combat this patriarchal culture that pushes women away from public spheres and pushes her into only like a family protected environment, and pushes her away from decision-making positions.
Thank you very much, Judge Salazar, for your intervention, and particularly also for bringing up the aspect of sexual harassment in the judiciary. And I see parallels to our discussion that we had last week amongst women politicians and women in political parties. But I would like to direct now our attention to the question that came in from the audience. And one goes actually to Justice Alouar. Is the report, the audit that you mentioned, is it publicly available so that anybody interested in this kind of assessment of the state of gender balance in the Kenyan judiciary can have a look at it? Or is it still just circulating amongst stakeholders?
Actually, I found it online.
Okay.
I got to know about it just yesterday, and I went online. I'm yet to to find out whether it's publicly available. I didn't know about it, unfortunately. But when I got to know about it yesterday, I quickly ran online and I found it.
Excellent. Yeah. So to our participant, please have a look, search it in Google, and you will certainly find it. Another participant was asking, at what stage in a career trajectory do gender gaps in the legal sector emerge, and why? So is there a kind of a joint kind of career path that you have with your male colleagues? And would you say there is a distinctive point where women are falling behind? It's a question to everybody, so I don't know who would like to jump in first. Nancy?
Sí. En el caso de Costa Rica.
Well, in the case of Costa Rica, the legal career has a kind of cultural aspect. The moment when women leave or graduate from college and they make a decision to have a family, and there's a barrier. Yeah, you know, merit. Women are requested or are obliged to meet certain conditions. For example, by writing books, writing papers, getting a PhD, teaching experience. And so they get special points or merits. And it's easier for men to meet these requirements at certain ages, easier than women. So women go up the ladder after making lots of sacrifice or after having raised the children. So there's a kind of division point. The two paths diverge when women leave college and the requirements imposed. Another thing we have seen in other countries in Latin America affecting women is, these courts that prepare judge examinations. These boards have parity or more men than women. Just, for example, you have written examination. I was told something about a Brazilian colleague. Women started going up the ladder when the examinations used a code, another real name of the candidate. So the person who had to correct the examination didn't know if the candidate was a man or a woman. So as the colleague from Ecuador said, there are very serious cultural barriers. And in the case of the legal career in my country, all the merit system is structured and based on male parameters. What happens if you want to enter the judiciary? You have to go through an open examination, and you have to be elected by 2/3 of the members of parliament. That is 38 out of 57. So all the scores, the marks have to do with books published, articles, papers, PhDs, and what have you. In the case of women judges, what happens with their rulings and decisions? Well, they are not taken into account. Their contributions to case law is not measured, is not taken into account. So there are only male or masculine parameters. So the two roads get apart. Yeah, so there is no real equality.
Thank you very much. There was
Muchísimo.
Going up. Anya Seibert 4, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to follow up on Nancy Hernandez because it very nicely fits to what I said in the beginning. I think this is true for different legal professions. I think we perceive a lot of equality in terms of the studies, law studies, graduation. Then even some states provide for mandatory clerking, for example, where you can still perceive a lot of equality, but the more the young professionals advance in their careers, the more difficult it becomes. I would say that usually the time slot is between perhaps 25 and 30, where a lot of women have to decide where they go. First of all, it informs their choice of the legal profession oftentimes. What we can see in a lot of countries, I was told, for example, from Greece, that there is a majority of women on the bench because this is can be more acquainted or, well, is more fitting for women who want to have children than for male, which may also show some kind of a reverse discrimination because oftentimes male opt for the higher rewarded professions, so they may not be interested in becoming a judge. And the same is true for the judicial, for the academic career, where I would say the graduates still come in and start with the PhDs. Oftentimes, female doctoral students are not able to finish it. I mean, I remember that when I did my doctorate in the US, I was 9 months pregnant writing my exams, my PhD exams, standing because I could not sit anymore. So there's a lot of challenge there. And you know, the more this kicks into it, the more it becomes difficult, and oftentimes the decisions are taken by the women themselves. But as Judge Hernandez just pointed out, oftentimes the selection is done by a predominantly male audience, which has their own perspective on merits, and they measure it differently in terms of the time that you have pursued and flexibility and so on and so forth. So I would say that this is the time of judicial careers where we see a lot of structural imbalance. If you allow, I would like to say goodbye now because I have to return to my work. It was really a pleasure being on the panel with my colleagues. Really a privilege. Thank you very much for sharing your views. I think we, despite the fact that we have very different backgrounds, we share a lot of experiences, and I wish you all the best in your future careers, and unfortunately need to say goodbye. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us. It was such a pleasure and enriching discussion with you. Thank you, and hope to see you soon.
Bye.
Bye. And our next question goes to Mani Salame, particularly on the situation in Lebanon and the situation and status of women. Our participant asked about the kind of mobilization of women, particularly in the aftermath of the explosion last year, would any constitutional change amendment improve the status of women and the role they are playing? So Amani, would you like to come in and answer this question?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Andrea. Well, actually, I would love to thank our participant for this very interesting question. Actually, the revolution of 2019, during this revolution that was really amazing, women voices were really up to a certain level, and we experienced a big movement of women refusing the actual situation in the country, and every kind of all kind of illegal activities, for the simple reason that women do not compromise. Women, or at least they compromise much less than men, and they refuse the situation that they do not let live in a normal situation and to have their basic rights. So yes, women had their voices. We heard their voices, and they were in the streets, and they were demonstrating, and they were refusing everything that is going on, and this was really amazing. Yes, a change in the constitution in a way that we need more.
Amani, you are frozen. Perhaps can you switch off your video so that you get the audio? Because sometimes you are just cutting off.
Oh, I think maybe this is the internet that
yes,
is.
It's the internet. Sometimes it works better if you switch off the video, and it has a bit more capacity.
Yeah, okay, excuse me for that. Well, yes, I was saying that a change in the constitution might help in which way? We do not have a big percentage of women in the parliament. So maybe as a start, it's good to have a certain quota, you know, on parliamentarian, in the list of election lists, in order to have a minimum participation of women, because women do not have the same financial situation like men. So their access to politics and to election is minor than men. This is for one. And two, the question. Well, I wouldn't really do this distinction between women and men in this field. I believe that every real citizen should be eager for a change, you know, eager for refusing everything that has been going on through years and led to this catastrophic situation in the country. I believe in the power of change, but we have to start by ourselves in order to refuse corruption, starting in our house, in our work, in our small society, before going wider. So this is what we really count on. And the election that's supposed to happen next year, I hope we will find this kind of change, this kind of new image that we're looking for. And this is how we start fighting corruption, by fighting corruption in our small circle. And then it goes wider. So I believe that everything that's going on since 2019 will have a tremendous effect on the future of our country. And women definitely have their role to play in this field, starting by, like I said, the quota in the parliamentary elections. Well, this is my answer. Thank you.
Excellent. I think, unfortunately, we are also reaching the end of our session. It was really such a pleasure to discuss with you. And as I said right in the beginning, when we were in the waiting room, I would even have loved to have you all in New York to discuss in person. And perhaps at a certain stage, we will be able to do this again. But I would like to thank all of you, knowing as a high-ranking judge on the highest courts of your country, you have a full agenda, and it's really an honor to have you with us. So thanks so much for sharing your experiences and your rich also overview on the situation in your country, but also beyond. And I think today's discussion has underlined that the quality of jurisdiction really is enhanced by the diversity on the courts, be it from a gender perspective, but also from an age perspective. And this relates particularly to areas such as human rights. And it's not the lack of competent, highly qualified women that impedes a better representation of women in the judiciary. It's mainly the structural constraints in the judiciary itself, as also audit reports are showing, but it's also the broader social environment that women in the judiciary, like any other woman who tries to build up a career, are facing this kind of constant struggle of balancing family life and your own professional career. So it has been very encouraging to hear it's possible and you can make a difference. And certainly the constant scrutiny you are under and every woman moving into the field will come under, unfortunately, should not prevent us from saying the sky is the limit, as Justice Alouach rightly said in the beginning. It should not impede us to strive for more. And I hope for all participants, this has been an encouraging and an informative discussion. Once again, my sincere thanks to our participants and panelists. And I hope to see you soon again in a different context. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.